Mother was very strict. She was really strict. And that was hard on me because I was this adventuresome kid that wanted to go play with my friends and ride my bike. And I had a horse, Old Shorty, Krelbaki. He would not get away from the yard until I could get, I'd have to kick and kick to get him to get about so far away from the yard. And then we just ride and I just go all over. I went everywhere on him. I loved it, but when you started headed for home, he'd get about so close and he'd burst into a run, and I never could ride that well. I'd bounce, and I didn't like that. I just never learned how to ride the horse that well. But I didn't have him very long. There was a time when Dad, all of a sudden he came up missing, and I said, "Mom, what happened to my horse?" And she said, "Well, we had to sell him." And so I didn't have him anymore. And then I learned the bike, and I could ride the bike, and I took off on the bike and went where I wanted to go. Mom was very, very definite. She was very strict, and she tried really hard to raise her daughters to be proper and to behave proper. And when you went out on a date, you always go to the bathroom before you leave, so that you never had to go out of the dance room to go to the bathroom. You just stayed where you were at the whole time, and it was fine, you know. But she was very definite about proper dress. There was never immodesty in any way, shape, or form. She would have rolled over in her grave if we'd have ever dressed like the girls do nowadays, because you didn't wear sleeveless blouses, even very rare. They just barely did a few, but they weren't sleeveless like tank tops. They were just barely cut at the corner. But she was sewed. She did most all of our clothes we wore. She sewed them, and lots of times she just cut out the own patterns herself and invented them. She was very, very inventive, and she was a really good cook. She just could cook anything. She rarely used recipes, but she could make anything you wanted. And she also played the piano by ear. You hum a tune, and she could play it. And if you didn't like it in that key, it was too high to sing, then she'd lower it into a different key. She was marvelous. Just loved the way she played the piano. And she played it lots and lots, and we learned to sing from the piano. And I think I had a real choice growing up. You know, I used to feel like that we were really lucky, because our family was really close, and we had our cousins, that their families weren't that close. They didn't have the fun within their family that we did, and we got along well. Like I say, we used to have spit fights and things like that, but we never fought, and there was not horrible hostility between us as kids. We just got along. Mom wouldn't allow it. She just wouldn't let us fight. We argued. We were human. But anyway, she was so capable in so many, many ways. But I was a runaway. And I think sometimes that, well, when I was born, my dad had gone away to Wyoming, and he really didn't intend to come back, but he stopped in Salt Lake, and his father, he called his sister. There was one telephone in Tridale. It was hang on the wall, and you cranked it to make it ring. But anyway, and my Aunt Ethel had that telephone, and Daddy called out, and to see if the baby had been born yet. Because Mother always carried her babies about 10 months, every one of us. And so when I finally was born, he called to find out if I'd come in. And Aunt Ethel said, "Oh, you've got to come home and read." She's the most beautiful girl. Had tons of black hair and just such a pretty little baby. Anyway, and he talked to his dad in Salt Lake, and his dad said, "You know, Reed, you have a responsibility. You have married. You have 3 children. You need to go home and honor that marriage and make a good life and raise your children the way you should." So Dad decided, okay. So he came home, and he never ever strayed from that. You know, never did. Tridale was first called Liberty for some silly reason, and it was Liberty, but then there were 3 dales. There was Little Valley, and then there was kind of hills, and then there was another little valley where the center valley was, and then there was another that was, so they called it Tridale with the 3 dales, and we lived in the center dale, and it was a pretty unique. I'm very grateful that I grew up there. It was wonderful. It was a good, clean town, and everyone was relatively friendly, helpful, and there was a lot of family members, and it was a close-knit community. It was a good place to grow up, especially for me. I was an adventuresome, wild little hooligan that ran the country all over, but it was nothing that I could get into that wasn't okay. You know, we didn't have anything in town that was a detriment to our growth and development. My dad worked away from home all the time. He'd go away on Monday mornings and he'd be gone during the week. He was a gilsonite miner, and he was very professional as a miner. He had a record, in fact, in the encyclopedias, it has a record in there stating that McConkie had dug by pick, with a pick, more gilsonite than any other man that had ever recorded. They had these great big sacks that they loaded the gilsonite into it, and they sewed it up with a needle, and had big old long needles that they sewed it up with, and shipped them on the pulley that lifted it up out of there. And he shipped 200 in one day, and the average man would dig 35 at best sacks. But he said, I kind of laid off the day before and I stocked a lot of it, so he dug, but he shipped 200 bales in one day, and that record was in there. But he was a professional in his profession. And I said, oh, Daddy, don't you hate it down in there? It's so dark, because when his light would go out, he was absolutely in the dark. There was no way you could see anything. It was just black, black, black. But he said, no, I feel safer there than I feel out on the highways where there's lots of cars running around, running me down and stuff. But his light would go out and he'd have to crawl on his hands and knees out of the drift, because the drifts would go up like this, and then they'd dig like this and dig it out to ship it. And then they had the little cars that they would put a track down, and so as you go back further into the drifts, it would go back further and further and further. And so when your light would go out, and he had no light, they'd have to go out, and then he'd pull on a rope that was down the side of the shaft that went down, and ring for the bucket to come down, and he'd get on it and go up and get lights. But usually he was prepared with that sort of a thing. But anyway, he liked it. And he says, I've had my mom take my hand and lead me out many times when he couldn't see. His mother had been dead for a long time. But anyway, he was really a professional in his field of labor. And being a miner was not a praiseworthy type of profession in the world we live in. But the gilsonite was a product that they wouldn't let him quit. He wanted to get at the service, but they wouldn't let him go because they needed the gilsonite, because they use it for insulating wires, and I don't know, they use it in explosives, or I don't know what they use it for. But anyway, so he was there. He had a rock hit him in his lip, and he got cancer. And so he was used as a guinea pig. When I was 6 years old, he was a guinea pig for radium treatments for cancer. And his lip had a dip in it, where it hid this great big sore that got big and worse. It went down into his throat here. But they cured it. Dad worked at the Pariette Mining, which was out here about 60 miles south of Mighton. And they had a center, little bunk houses, and we'd go out there and stay sometimes, but just for a visit for a little while, and then we'd come home, of course, in the evening. But we'd maybe on his birthday or some special day, we'd go out and surprise him and spend some little time. But you were never allowed inside of the mines. It was too dangerous to take kids down in there. Dad wouldn't have let us go anyway. My father was so honest was honest. And if you told a little bit of a white lie, then that was dishonest. It wasn't a little white lie, it was dishonest. And I was very strongly impressed about honesty. Honesty in what you said, honesty in the way you acted, honesty in your money, honesty and everything. He was just very, very there, and he had a really, really strong testimony of the gospel. And even though he didn't live it for a lot of years, when he finally decided to go and come active in the church, he went to, they moved to Salt Lake after he retired, and he worked in the temple. And he had done over 5,000 endowments and hundreds of baptisms and sealings, and he'd go down in the morning and stay all day long and work at the temple all day long, come home in the evening. Mother didn't do that much because of her health. She didn't have good health, but Dad did, and he just did thousands and thousands of endowments, and he enjoyed that really a lot. But he said, I told my mom that that I would do the work, I'd work in the temple, and so he did. Anyway, Mom on the other side did lots of genealogy, and she loved the genealogy, and she did a lot of research, and she did a lot of submitting of papers and stuff like that were good. Mom was, like I said, she was the only girl, and her brothers were very protective of her. When she was growing up, they didn't want her dating with this guy or that guy because they wanted to make sure that Mother didn't get involved with anybody that wasn't just perfectly okay. And so she didn't do much dating. Mom was 6 years younger than Daddy, and Dad became acquainted with the Goodrich people in Tridell, although Daddy was in Mazer, grew up in Mazer. He was born in Moab. His father came back from down in the Mexican, what do you call it, down where the polygamous families had gone down into Mexico. He was one of those families. My dad, great-grandpa, went down there. He had 3 wives, and so he had taken his 3 wives, and they were in Mexico for a long time. When they came back, one of the families was settled in Monticello, and that was where Bruce R. McConkie's family was from, was Uncle Oscar. And my dad was moved into Moab, and when he was 7 years old, he and his family moved to Mazer, and he helped drive a wagon from Mazer as they moved up, because there was a big family. Dad was number 10 child of 16. Wow, his mom was just a little tiny short lady. She was a cute little short lady, but boy, when she was angry, you knew you was getting told off, because she did really set you straight, but she was a sweetheart. I loved her. But, and Dad said I was the 10th child, and I was supposed to have been given back for tithing. But he had a whole bunch of brothers, and they were good guys. And his sisters were all funny people, kooky. Aunt Martha lived in Salt Lake, and when she was there, when she became a widow, she would put a ladder up to the side of her house because she kept locking herself out and she couldn't get in. As a child, I think I was a trial to my family because I was very adventuresome. I ran away a lot. I had a bicycle and I ran away. I had a horse and I would run away on my horse. And I was always wanting to be doing something, you know. My sisters, my older sister was and I were the chore boys in the family because my father worked away from home. He was a Gilt's night miner. So he was gone during the week and only came home on the weekends. And so Janice and I did all the chores, and she was 5 years older than I was, and she was so confident, and she was kind of assigned to take care of me, and it was a real trial to her because she had to go find me all the time. She didn't like that at all. And my sister Riley Ray is a very good friend. We were in high school. She's 2 years older than me, but we went around together in high school, walking up and down the halls, and people couldn't believe that we were sisters because we didn't fight. But Ila Ray is the kind of person that just doesn't fight. She just takes life with a grain of salt, and she is just a very accommodating person. Her husband just passed away at Thanksgiving time. And so we've been able to reconnect somewhat more because she was so glued to care for her husband before he passed away. And so it's been really nice to get back to friendship with her. My sister, just younger than me, Polly, she was my twin. People would say, oh, you're twins, and she was just as blonde as I was black-headed. And that would be so funny. But we were pretty much the same size. We were only a year and a month and a day apart. And so we were very close, and we always shared the same bedroom and all. But she moved to Salt Lake and lived out there, so you don't spend that much time with people when they're not here. But she's now living in Rochester, New York with her son back there, so we keep in touch on the telephone and email. And I kind of miss that, but it's okay, you know. It was best for her to go with her son, and that's good. And my brothers, I have Danny, and Danny is a person who has super charisma. He's very intelligent. He's been a bishop and a counselor in the stake presidency, and he's a super missionary, and he's just, if you go in a room, it seems like that the attention always goes to Danny. His conversation is always just extremely interesting, and he always has something fun to say, and he's just a delightful person to be around. And then Ricky, my youngest brother, was born when I was 7, and he was a doll. We just loved him to pieces, and he's got an extremely brilliant mind too. You ask him what day of the week was 1975 on January 12th, and he'll tell you what day of the week it was. He's just super smart. He does genealogy now. He was an accountant, and he worked for the state department. And then he's now retired and does genealogy at the genealogy library. And man, he knows it all. He's just really in tune with that sort of thing.